when Kathy asked me if I would be willing to do this class, I started out thinking of it in sort of, the standard sort of ways. And the topics for each of the sessions that Kathy gave me were good topics, but I realized as I was thinking about it and preparing that they really had to do with what a Christian would think would be important about a religion. And she wanted me to start out on basic beliefs, theology. And of course, and you'll find out as we move along here, that's where a Christian would start, because everything is built around one's faith and what you assert, particularly what you assert about the person of Jesus. That's what makes you a Christian. But for a Jew, theology is, all right, we have a theology, but it's not that important. I don't mean it's not important, I mean that it's not where we start. Where we start is that Judaism is not a religion, and it's not a tribe in an anthropological sense, it's a people. When one converts to Judaism, when one is born into a Jewish family, one becomes a member of the Jewish people. When you have a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah at 13, you are asserting the fact that you are identifying as a member of the Jewish people, and all of the traditions and customs and so on and so forth that come along with that are now ones that are binding upon you, and you have accepted. Jews are sometimes religious, but sometimes not. They're sometimes Zionists and sometimes not. Sometimes they have common language and sometimes they don't. All the usual criteria for what we might say marks a religion or a tribe or a clan don't necessarily apply to Judaism, although many do to some degree. The term that works best is people or peoplehood. And what is a people? As opposed to a religion, as opposed to a tribe, as opposed to any other kind of group. Well, that is the question for tonight. And we're going to start talking about it by my showing you a wonderful 15-minute DVD called The Tribe, but it's like in quotes.
Over 6 billion people live on the planet Earth. Thinking of them as a tribe of 100 people, there would be 60 Asians, 14 North and South Americans, 13 Africans, and 12 Europeans. 30 tribe members would be Christian, 18 would be Muslims, 13 Hindus, 6 Buddhists, and 33 would be other faiths, including, of the 100 tribe members, 1/4 of one would be Jewish. Within this circle, there was a woman named Ruth who created the Barbie doll. A Jewish woman created Barbie. Maybe Barbie can explain something about how this generation responds to being Jewish today. Since the old days, Jews refer to themselves as members of the tribe. But what does it mean to be a member of a tribe in the 21st century? A tribe is a group of people with something in common. For example, a tribe of hunters, a tribe of gatherers. Tribes can have other things in common, like interests or family. A tribe may have within it a smaller group or subset called sub-tribes. For example, the American tribe includes the sub-tribe of Democrats and the sub-tribe of Republicans, as well as many other sub-tribes. Although sub-tribes may disagree, they remain members of the larger tribe. Within the tribe of girls, there's the sub-tribe who love horses, and the sub-tribe who love Barbie dolls. Even within the tribe of boys, there's a sub-tribe who loves Barbie dolls. There's also a large sub-tribe that doesn't love Barbie dolls. But all sub-tribes can agree, Barbie doesn't look Jewish. Barbie's creator was named Ruth Handler. Barbie's full name is Barbara Millicent Roberts. Not such a Jewish name. Throughout her doll life, Barbie's had hundreds of identities. She's been astronaut Barbie, flight attendant Barbie, presidential candidate Barbie, and wedding Barbie who wears a diamond ring. Diamonds are formed when carbon is subjected to intense pressure over long periods of time. They're also a girl's best friend. Diamonds are often exchanged as part of Western marriage rituals. All tribes have marriage rituals. In the Jewish marriage ritual, the groom breaks a glass. This is symbolic of the fragility of life and in remembrance of the past. The American Jewish tribe has many sub-tribes. They're often arranged in terms of how observant they are: Orthodox, conservative, reform, renewal, unorthodox, orthodox, atheist, and many other sub-tribes. Ultra-Orthodox, Modern Orthodox, Hasidic, Reconstructionist, the Super Jew, the Kabbalahist, the Catholic who's into Kabbalah, the Jubu, the Julu, and the Hindu. Outside of religion, there are many cultural distinctions between Jews. For example, in New York, everyone seems Jewish. While in California, no one does. All American Jews share some things in common, like culture, heroes, and stereotypes. Too pushy, too greedy, too materialistic, too Jewish American princessy. In America, we don't have princesses. We have celebrities. The glorification of celebrities creates a culture of insiders and outsiders. Throughout history, the Jewish tribe has been treated as outsiders. As a result, Jews feel a special empathy with fellow outsiders. Maybe this also explains why they invented a bread with only an outside. Although Jews are often outsiders, when they meet other Jews, they feel like insiders. One might say the essential Jewish perspective is standing outside and looking in. America loves stories of outsiders becoming insiders, insiders becoming outsiders, and quintessential insiders like Barbie. Barbie is viewed as both an icon and as a false idol. There's an old story about worshiping idols. It starts with an idol worshiper named Terah. He had a son named Abraham. One day, Abraham heard a voice that said, "If you believe only in me, I will make the Jews into a great nation and give them a homeland flowing with milk and honey. You just have to do one tiny little thing for me." Abraham married Sarah, and they had a grandson named Jacob. Jacob had a dream of a ladder with angels climbing to heaven. Later, Jacob wrestled with an angel who gave him the new name Israel, which means to wrestle or to struggle. Jacob fathered a daughter and 12 sons that became the 12 tribes of Israel. Later, after Moses led them out of Egypt, the Jews got impatient and started worshiping an idol. Moses lost his temper. They weren't supposed to worship idols. However, going to sunny places to worship idols is a hard habit to break. Idolizing Barbie began in 1959. Ruth Handler named the Barbie doll after her daughter. She also named Barbie's boyfriend after her own son, Ken. The Barbie doll was hugely successful. Ruth then discovered she had breast cancer and left Mattel, the toy company she co-founded. Surviving cancer, she then went on to found a prosthetic breast company, thus making 2 fortunes from plastic boobs. Barbie's anatomy is highly exaggerated. If a real woman had Barbie's dimensions, she couldn't stand up. Walking upright on two legs is a skill that primates acquired in what the archaeologists call the Pleistocene era. The first records of Jews were found in Egypt in 1300 BCE. Some archaeologists believe ancient Egyptians called Jews Habiru, which means strangers. Wherever Jews went, they alternated between prosperity and persecution. They weren't allowed to own land and were often uprooted, so it was difficult to carry material possessions. They developed portable identities and rituals. They were forced to choose professions they could take with them, like money lending and stone cutting. When Jews had to leave, diamonds were often essential to survive. They hid them in their clothes and in their teeth. Because Jews were strangers, outsiders, and mobile, they were often blamed and scapegoated. The idea that these outsiders might get inside often led to false accusations, persecutions, and murder, forcing them to disperse again. This dispersion is called the diaspora. Without a homeland, the Jewish tribe was on the margins for thousands of years. Since the Holocaust, Jews have promised each other, never again. In 1948, a Jewish state was recognized by the United Nations. Its founders named it Israel, to wrestle or to struggle. What all Jews have in common is persistence, thousands of years of withstanding pressure and surviving against the odds. At the core of all tribes is the instinct to survive. Fight. Flight. Blend in, just like Barbie. When Jews first arrived in America, they also blended in. They changed their names and sometimes their appearances. Ruth Handler's father fled persecution in Poland and came to America in 1907. Ruth Handler modeled the first Barbie doll after the German Lily doll, a sexy toy for men that became popular after World War II. Ruth brought this Aryan ideal of beauty to America, changed her name, and achieved the American dream. Maybe Ruth instinctively knew that Barbie would not only survive, but prosper. And prosper she did. Over 1 billion Barbie dolls have been sold. That works out to around 77 Barbie dolls for every Jewish person. And today there's a sub-tribe of American Jews who grew up with Barbie in an assimilated world. But things have changed. The idea of assimilation is being challenged. American Jews live in a multicultural world where cultures now circulate and intermix freely. And this new freedom allows them to redefine and reclaim their connection to tradition. These Jews like to remix music, cultures, and codes. Their type of Judaism is more of a roll your own. Some in this generation are religious, but many are not. While they don't belong to a temple, they, like other tribes, may connect through culture or family or food or humor or arguing or just plain guilt. Their parents may have outsourced their Jewish education, So these Jews went to Hebrew school, reluctantly. But many got their Jewish education from Hollywood. This generation wants fewer sermons and more conversations. They do believe in healing the earth, but when they get a sermon on Tikkun Olam, they may think, kumbaya. They may define kosher differently. Their version of the Talmud is the internet. These Jews may know less about Kabbalah than they do about yoga. Sometimes they marry outside their tribe. They're pro-choice, as in they choose to tell someone if they're Jewish. They rarely experience anti-Semitism directly, and when they do, they don't always speak up. These Jews may not be sure how they feel about Israel. To their parents, Israel was clearly heroic. For today's young Jews, things may look less clear. When speaking to those who aren't Jewish, they may defend it, but internally, they may be unsure. They can believe in Israel and not agree with all of its politics, just as they can believe in America without agreeing with all its politics. Among their Jewish friends, they don't really talk about it. They are part of a whole generation with portable identities and professions, and they have many names for themselves. A cultural Jew. There's the culinary Jew. Some Jews say,
I'm an agnostic.
Or,
I'm an American.
Or,
I'm Jewish. Jewish, yeah.
Or,
I'm a feminist.
Or,
a Jewess.
Or,
I'm unaffiliated.
Or, I'm a bad Jew. Or,
I'm a bad Jew.
Some who, rather than saying that they're a Jew, they might prefer to say they're Jew-ish. Before answering, they may ask,
Who wants to know? You Jewish?
And for both outsiders and insiders, Jewish identity can be perplexing.
You're Jewish? Wow. You don't look Jewish. You don't act Jewish. And he says it in this tone that sounds like he's complimenting me. And I say nothing. I say nothing when which combined with a flirty smile translates to thank you. I say nothing because I'm drunk on denial coladas. I say nothing because I got a contact high of someone's anti-Semitic crack pipe. I say nothing because somewhere along my life's graph, I've been swayed to believe that being Jewish is not too cool, not too sexy. I say nothing because I'm in a deep sleep, a snow-white coma, destined to meet my prince 5 years later in the form of stone in Jerusalem named the Wailing Wall. Our lips press, flesh to cool granite. I place folded paper with written prayers for the dead in a nook. In a nook in the wall next to a woman with concentration camp numbers tattooed on her forearm. Surrounded by fervent praying and bodies swaying, I am far more awake than I ever thought possible. I suddenly remember the exodus of the Israelites, and I walk barefoot from the wall in the desert to the bar. Bartender, tell me I don't look Jewish. Tell me I don't act Jewish, because I'm thinking, I'm saying, what does Jewish look like to you? Because I'm the Hebrew mamita, long-lost daughter of Abraham and Sarah, the sexy oy-baying, matzah-eating, chutzpah-having, non-cheaping, non-conspiracizing, always questioning, hip-hop listening, Torah scroll reading, all people loving, pride-filled Jewish girl. Bigging up all people who are a little miffed because someone tells you you don't look like or act like your people. Impossible, because you are your people. You just tell them they don't look, period.
Each generation wrestles with old questions in new ways. What does it mean to be Jewish? What does it mean to be a member of any tribe in the 21st century?
Any quick reactions? It's a little overwhelming.
Yeah, it just made me sad at the end because my nieces are Jewish, and you know, the two older ones have had their bar mitzvahs, and I don't know what they meet at school because they go to St. Stephen's, and it's a big mix of children of different religions.
Yes.
And I haven't really sat down and talked to them about it. It just brought up a lot of feelings about that.
I appreciate that. Yeah. There's a fair number of Jewish kids who go to St. Stephen's, and they go to chapel services. You know, people over there are actually pretty tolerant and pretty open.
I'm sorry, I
nice
can't
experience.
hear. That's pretty loud.
I'm sorry, I have a soft voice. I will do the best I can.
Can we turn off the?
Oh, there'll be a little puddle by the end of the evening. You can turn off the AC.
Okay.
I'll try to speak up.
I think that's making most of the noise, Mary, is just the AC
Yeah,
rather than
yeah.
the thing. So.
Yeah, I don't think it's the fan. Okay, any other reactions?
It just seems they're affiliated and they're unaffiliated.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, but I think perhaps there's other groups that are similar in perhaps.
Can you give me an
that way.
example?
Well, I think a lot of our Native American cultures, in some ways, are like that. Particularly those who are struggling to keep their identity and their culture alive, and they may or may not have assumed a different religion other than the more animalistic kind of culture.
Well, maybe so. I really hadn't thought about how it applies to Native Americans. You might be right. Possibly, yes. Anybody else? You have a reaction?
It seemed like it would touch on all the stereotypes. And
Yeah, they hit most of them, didn't they?
and once again, the lesson, you know, you just can't just assume anything about someone. There's lots of different ways to look at it.
Well, you know, there's a human psychological problem here because we all look at the world and categorize it. You have to in order to survive. You can't actually think through every decision you make, most decisions you make, based on categories that you have already concluded exist in the world, or you've been taught, whatever may be the case. And often they're right, but sometimes they're not. You know, but the whole process of seeing the world in categories runs against this idea of having a nuanced view of another person or another group, because we tend to generalize about other groups. You know, if you're a Republican, you have ideas about who Democrats are, and you're a Democrat, you have an idea about who Republicans are. Do you have any Democrats here? Do you have any Republicans here? Oh, good. Okay, now I don't have to worry. Okay, so what I'm saying is that our default position day to day is to see the world in terms of categories. And that can get in the way of seeing things as they are, which is the end of that poem. You just don't see, because you see the other as an example of some category that you have learned or you've constructed. Any other, yeah?
I was dismayed of the history of persecution and exclusion, and wonder why. Is this happened to other groups to anywhere near the extent that it has to Jews? Just horrifying.
That's a good question. You know, it's been said that anti-Semitism is the oldest prejudice. And that may be true, I don't know. It's been around for a long time. And I think it's also fair to say that, like you, most people are not aware, not just of the prejudice that's part of Jewish history, but Jewish history in general, you know. And unfortunately, these days, one little segment having to do with Israel and the Middle East, it gets a lot of play. But even there, most people have very little historical background to look at and understand what's going on in any kind of nuanced way. So, you know, we see there are freedom fighters, there are settlers, and so on and so forth, which, you know, is what I'm talking about in terms of categories. You know, that's how we do it. All right. You know, there is something called the lachrymose history of Judaism. Okay. You know, Judaism is a history of one sad event after another, you know. The flip side of that is that people sometimes say, what is the Jewish holiday about? They tried to kill us, we survived, let's eat. which is also a little bit reductionist, you know, but the point I'm making here is, if you're Jewish, that whole view, that whole understanding of what Jewish history is part of who you are. You absorb it the way that you absorb being an American. Now, if I tell you, okay, we have a holiday coming up, and what we're going to do is we're going to eat hot dogs outside. We're going to have fireworks and maybe a band concert in the center of town. What holiday is it? Did you have to think much about that? No, because that's what 4th of July is, right? And if I were to ask you, what is the holiday in which we eat turkey and cranberry sauce and watch football games? Yeah, of course. You know, and if you're an American, this is automatic. If you're not an American, that might say, well, what a curious little custom that is. But, you know, if we go over to France and we see a French family at dinner at a restaurant and the little kid is drinking wine, we go, whoa, you can't do that, he's a kid. But in France, you can, okay? It's a quaint little French custom. Like eating the salad at the end. I've never understood that. All right, so that's what it means to have a culture. You learn the signals, you learn the customs, you learn the values, you learn the history just because you're a part of the group. And you don't have to have special instruction in order to know what those things are. They're automatic. So when you ask, what does it mean to be a Jew? What is Judaism about? First and foremost, it's about a group of people that have a culture that in large measure they all share, and which is embedded in their society or embedded in their group. When I work with somebody who wants to convert to Judaism, one of my requirements is they have to get involved in a synagogue and they have to get involved in the Jewish Community Center and so forth. Why? Because that is where you learn all of this amorphous stuff that's out there that's part of being part of the group, okay? So, having said all that, I want to talk a little bit about what are some of these values or core beliefs that are part of all this. In the video, you noticed, I'm sure, that the narrator, by the way, Peter, you know Peter Coyote? He's a pretty well-known actor. Anyway, he's a Jewish guy, as it happens. he pointed out something called Tikkun Olam. And there was a definition on the screen, but he didn't read the definition. So you might have kind of missed it, you know. So let me tell you a little bit about it, because this is one important fundamental value. Tikkun Olam means the repair of the world. Now, this has something to do with Kabbalah, and I don't mean, you know, quartz crystals and red threads and all that kind of nonsense that Madonna does. I mean, that's not Kabbalah. I mean, it's a scam. Anyway, what I mean is, in one form of Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, there's the idea that the universe was created by God when it was filled with God's presence, the vessel, the creation, was not strong enough to contain God, who's after all infinite and powerful and so on and so forth. So it splintered into all sorts of shards or fragments. And that's the world that we see around us. Everything we have here is a shattered element of this primordial creation, according to the Kabbalah. Not everybody believes it. And so, what is the job of the Jew? What is the calling? It is to put this all back together, to fix it. Okay? The world is, here's a term that'll sound familiar, broken. And the job that you have as a Jew is to put it back together. Okay? That does not happen because you believe in anything in particular. It happens because you go out and do things. All sorts of different kinds of things. Maybe in your career, you do things that help to put things back together, to repair things that are broken. Maybe you become a labor organizer. The American labor movement, lots of the original founders were Jewish. Because it's part of Tikkun Olam, you know. Or maybe you become a doctor. Or if you can't become a doctor, you become a dentist. You know, it's almost as good. Although it has a higher suicide rate. Did you know that? Yes. Yeah. So you might take a career that helps you day to do this kind of work. Maybe you get involved in politics. Maybe you get involved in organizations that have to do with social change. All of these are ways of effecting Tikkun Olam, the repair of the world. For a Jew, the world is not something that will be fixed at the end of time by the intervention of some divine presence, however it gets defined. It's the process of repair that one gets involved in day by day by day. And by the end, the world is repaired, whenever that's going to be, who knows. And then the Messiah comes, if you believe in a personal Messiah, or a Messianic era begins, because that's what you've just created, right? You've repaired everything in the world. It's all repaired and working fine. That would be a good definition of the Messianic era, don't you think? So, even from a theological point of view, this notion of Tikkun Olam is very important. Judaism has 613 commandments, mitzvot. And these mitzvot, these commandments, relate to all sorts of different areas of life. Some of them are about civil relations. Some of them are about criminal behaviors. Some of them are about sexuality, or the family, or business, whatever. 613 of them. It's a lot. Although, actually, most of them you do all the time without even thinking about it. For example, see, I'll ask you, you look like you're a person that you would know this. So let me ask you a question. Did you murder anybody today? Good. You observed a commandment. Bravo. Okay. Did you steal anything? You observed the commandment too. Okay. See what I'm saying?
Name a harder one, though.
Well, I think not murdering somebody. Do you have teenage children?
Just sort of teenage grandson.
All right. Well, if you are with them all day, you know what I mean. The impulse to commit mayhem on them is very, very real. I'm only kidding. Sometimes. There are all sorts of things that we do that are commandments, sort of almost naturally. Some of them are not, like eating kosher food. Okay, that would not be something that most people would do naturally. Okay, but I will say that every culture has laws and customs relating to how food is prepared, how it's cooked, how it's eaten, when it's eaten, etc., etc. So if you're looking from the outside, it seems, oh my God, what a complicated system it must be to keep kosher. Well, but it's not any more complicated than what we do as Americans. It's just that we know all the rules already. We learned them from the time we were little babies, so we know all the rules and all the customs. And although it changes from time to time, pretty much it stays mostly solid. And my son and daughter-in-law are very big into various new food understandings. Like they are locavores. Okay? Does everybody here know what a locavore is? Somebody who eats in a crazy way. It's loco. No. It's a little Spanish, English kind of joke, I'm sorry. Somebody who eats food that is grown or produced locally. Okay? Okay? A locavore. As opposed to a carnivore. Okay? All right, or it's sourced locally, whatever the distinction is there. There's a distinction there, I'm not sure I understand. They will not eat any food that's processed. What they really mean is certain kinds of processing, because there are almost no foods that get no processing at all, unless you're standing underneath the tree and waiting for the apple to drop into your mouth. Unless you're doing that, it's processed to some degree. But some processes are okay, some processes are not, and that makes a lot of sense. And so on. Okay? I was interested some years ago when there was a national boycott of grapes. And some of you will remember this. And in support of the Farm Workers Union. Since there are no Republicans here, I can talk about this. And there was a question that was raised in some Jewish circles about the boycott, and in general, what you should do about food if it is the result of labor that is treated unfairly. Because in Judaism, it is not kosher to eat a food if it's the result of oppressed labor. Okay, did anybody know that was part of keeping kosher? No, I see. That's the part you don't know about. Anyway, so there was a Beit Din, a Jewish court in Denver, of all places, that ruled on this, and they said that the grapes from California were not kosher, and that if you keep kosher, you were not permitted to eat them because they're a result of oppressed labor. By the way, this notion of oppressed labor applies in lots of other contexts. For example, is anybody here wearing running shoes from Thailand? That's good, because you'd have to take them off. Okay, the result, they're made by oppressed labor. I had a number of years ago, I was asked to read a reading from the Hebrew Scriptures at a celebration of the birthday of Cesar Chavez. And, they always give the rabbi the Old Testament reading. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like being typecast, you know. And so we weren't supposed to, you know, to speak. We were just going to do the readings. And I got up there, and you know, yeah, I'm in this beautiful church on the east side of town. There's all sorts of people there. You know, some of them are even people I know already. You know, Jim Harrington was there, you know, and like I said, I can't resist, and I quoted the verse from Deuteronomy that says that in the conflict between the rights of the worker and the rights of the boss, the rights of the worker take precedence. Well, you would have thought that the place was, they were going to go crazy. Because I'm speaking to all these labor people, and I'm pointing out that in the Jewish tradition, the rights of the worker take precedence, and they hadn't heard anything like that. And Harrington came up to me afterwards, and he said, "Is that really true? Is that really true?" I said, "Yes," and I directed him to where to find the verse. My point is, all of these things are part and parcel of the culture if you're inside it. But you're not aware of it. No, that's me. I thought I turned off the ringer. I did. No, it's not me. No, it's you. Okay. So you are aware of these things because they're part of your culture. When you're coming from the outside, you've never heard of them, you don't know about them. But that doesn't stop us from having opinions about people from other groups. The reason I like a class like this is that it's an opportunity for all of us to understand, not just with regard to Jews, but with regard to all sorts of people in the world. It's probably a good idea to assume that there's stuff we don't understand and stuff we don't know that might change our point of view if we knew it. And because that's always a possibility, we ought to have a certain level of humility in talking about what we think somebody else stands for, or what some other group is about, and what their purposes are, and so on and so forth. That should be, you know, obvious, but I'm here to tell you that that isn't obvious. It happens all the time that people assume they know about somebody else, and the interesting part of it is that more often than not, not always, thankfully, but more often than not, what people think they know about the other is to their detriment. Okay? It's something that they think they know, which is a negative. Okay? Now, I don't think that's just an idiosyncratic impression of mine. 33 years or 34 years nowadays as a rabbi has taught me that that is quite often the case. Okay? I mean, there are some people who have, you know, you call them philo-Semitic. You know that term? Philo is, I'm not talking about the Greek pastry. I'm talking about lover, you know, as in the Greek root philo, right? And Semitic, Semites, one who loves Semites. But it's only in the last couple of years, and Semites always meant, in Western talks, Jews. In recent years, people have tried to confuse the issue. But philo-Semitic means somebody who likes Jews. So there are some people who have philo-Semitic stereotypes. Jews are smart. I like that one. That's good. Sometimes, though, it gets restated as Jews are cunning. Not so good. Or Jews have a great sense of humor. They laugh at all sorts of things, you know. It's true. We do have a lot of humor that's part of our culture. And, you know, if you look at the list of great comedians in the United States, a lot of them are Jewish, more than you would expect based on the percentage of the population. But the flip side is that Jews are oversensitive. You know, they get excited about stuff they really shouldn't get excited about. Jews are clannish. Jews are pushy. I don't know how you can be clannish and pushy. It seems like it's like a social impossibility. If you're clannish, then you're definitely the opposite of pushy. You know, isn't that right? Clannish means you stay together. I don't know. Jews are communists and capitalists. Communists and capitalists. Anybody here heard of Henry Ford? You know, Henry Ford was a remarkable anti-Semite. You knew that about him. An anti-Semite. You didn't know that? Oh, you have to read about Henry Ford and the Dearborn Independent, which is a newspaper that he published. And he was one of the guys who brought into the United States and disseminated and publicized the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a 19th century Russian anti-Semitic, what do I want to say, false document. What's the name of false document? I don't know, there's a word for it. He was a nasty guy about this kind of stuff. He was a nasty guy in a lot of ways, but a genius when it came to manufacturing things. You know. But I mention it only because Ford was one of these folks who helped to extend and disseminate many of these ideas. And he thought that Jews were part of an international cabal. By the way, do you know where the word cabal comes from?
I don't know where it comes from. I know it. I've heard that expression.
Yeah, it comes from Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism. And it's made up of Jews who control the world. They are communists and they are capitalists. They are, I mean, it's all sorts of things that are in conflict with each other. I wouldn't require that you read the Dearborn Independent, but one of these days, if you Google it, you'll read a little bit about it and get an idea what's involved. So here we have a question of how Jews fit into a society which is not Jewish. To what degree can you be Jewish authentically and be an American? Don't you know? You have to sort of compromise in some ways to do that, because not all American values are equal to Jewish values, and vice versa. Okay, I'll give you an example. Again, it comes from Jewish law. Most Jews are against capital punishment, and aside from the general reasons that many people are against capital punishment, although it's a minority these days in our country, although it hasn't always been a minority, is like this. In Jewish law, only life is equivalent to life. Only life is equivalent to life. Okay? You all know, you know, a life for a life, you know, the Lex Talionis, right? Okay. Okay, so what do? If somebody commits murder, is there some punishment that is a good substitute for the taking of life? Well, anything that you might suggest is less than the taking of life. So what do you want to do? Do you want to say, okay, here's, in this case, you know, you just have to go to jail for X number of years, or you have to pay this kind of fine, or whatever it is. Is that really what you want to say about how you deal with murderers? On the other hand, taking a life, how can you do that? Only God can do that. So people thought about this, rabbis thought about it. Here's what they came up with. It's really good. You can't get rid of the idea that only a life is equivalent to a life. So you leave that alone. But you look at the rules of evidence in a capital case. Now here's the rules of evidence in capital cases in Jewish law. You have to have, the Torah says either 2 or 3 witnesses. You need 3 witnesses. You make it stricter. And what do you have to be witnesses to? They have to be witnesses to the actual murder. Okay? You have somebody who walks into a room, another person who walks in after them, and they close the door, and you have 3 people standing outside, and one person walks out, and the other person never comes out. You might think, well, you go inside, you see the guy murdered. But you didn't see it. So you cannot give testimony. You're not a witness. Okay? Circumstantial evidence is out. Not only that, let's say there is a guy who's going to kill somebody else, and you're standing there, and you have to warn them that they're about to commit a crime or a trespass of the law. Why you have to warn them? Because if you didn't warn them, somebody might say, you know what, maybe this guy has something in for this other guy, and why wouldn't you try to prevent him from doing it? If you didn't prevent him from doing it or try to prevent him from doing it, then your testimony is doubtful. Okay? So you have to have 3 witnesses to the actual act. You have to warn the potential perpetrator in advance. If those are not fulfilled, you can't convict him of a capital murder. You can put him in jail for as long as you want, but you can't kill him. Now, if you think that this is an important way of looking at the laws of capital punishment, as I do, then you can't support capital punishment as it's practiced in the United States. People get convicted of capital crimes because of circumstantial evidence all the time. That's what the what's it called? The Innocence Project is all about. Okay, these are all people who are convicted by circumstantial evidence, and turns out some of them didn't do it. All right. So there's ways in which Jewish values and American values may not dovetail. Sometimes to the betterment, okay, to the good. On the other hand, maybe on the other side, there are other reasons for Jews to be affected by the general society. For example, there's no doubt that feminism has had a positive effect on the Jewish community. The role of women in Judaism has been changing for some time, and a significant reason for that is the feminist movement. That's a good way in which a different set of values has influenced Jewish values. So it works both ways. Yes?
Go back just a second to
Yeah, we're getting to the question and answer part right now. Yeah.
Are there any Jews in the military?
Are there Jews in the military?
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I would think so.
Sure, yeah.
After that statement, I would think their life and life would be different.
The Torah is not against killing. It is against murder. Okay. And there's a big difference. There are certain wars which the Torah says are incumbent upon people to fight. Other wars which are elective. And the rules about how you deal with those are different. But the Bible is not a pacifist document. Now, when I was in college in the 60s, there was a group that was helping Jewish students to prove cases of conscientious objection as Jews. It was a tough sledding, for them to do that. But this fellow named Rabbi Michael Robinson, who was a terrific guy and died a few years ago, was sort of the head of this group. So yeah, you can even have a Jewish conscientious objector, even though Jewish law is pretty clear that wars under certain circumstances are acceptable. See, here's the thing, and it comes across in the video. There are so many subgroups or understandings in Judaism, in the Jewish people, that you can't really say that there are too many things that everybody agrees to. there's a kind of network of customs and values and so forth, and people connect with some but not with others, and it's kind of interlocking, but it's not like here's one thing that every Jew agrees on. You probably have heard this, and I'll risk saying it. There's a joke that people always tell. When you have two Jews, you have three opinions. Okay? And it's true. It's absolutely true. We love to argue. We love to argue with each other, especially. But we'll also argue with you. And it comes up and in all sorts of ways. For example, I had to learn, living in Texas, to control my desire to argue. Because in Texas, arguing is thought to be rude. In New York, arguing shows you're paying attention. Okay? Because if you go to a yeshiva, an Orthodox rabbinical college, you study together. And how do you study together? You have a study partner. And the study partner and you sit at a table. And this is your study partner like forever. And if you walk into the classroom, it is the loudest classroom you will ever hear, because each of these pairs, that one is shouting at the other, it's nonsense, I can't believe that, you're a fool, blah, 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 so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that, and it's going on like that all the time. Okay. That is learning. It's called chadadim, sharpening, mutual sharpening. You are accountable for what you say, and your study partner is accountable for holding you accountable. Okay? And there's no virtue in saying, well, that's an interesting point of view. I can sort of see that. I mean, really. When we all know, when you say that, you're really saying to yourself, what kind of idiot are you? I'm just, it's part of taking what's inside, making it outside. All right, which is what Coyote was talking about as well. Any other questions? We have some time for Q&A. Yes, ma'am.
It might be too early, but I'd like to know something about you.
About me?
Yeah. Are you a rabbi in a synagogue? Which one?
Okay.
I don't know if the other
well, I have been a rabbi at several synagogues. I have been the Hillel director at the University of Texas and at the University of California in Santa Barbara. I founded a congregation in Austin called Halev, Voice of the Heart. But now I'm full.
Where is that?
They meet at the Jewish Community Center, the Dell campus. And I have a little part-time congregation in, you should pardon the expression, College Station. I have to be careful when I go there because, I've become a Longhorn. Not that I ever went to school at UT, but, you live in Austin, you become a Longhorn. And I can't say, anyway. That's just a little part-time gig. What I do really full-time is I have a website called everybodyneedsarabbi.com, and I teach and publish about Judaism on the internet, mostly for people who are not Jewish, but who are interested in learning something about Judaism as a faith tradition, as a historical fact, et cetera, et cetera. And I have clients and students from a number of different places in North America and South America. And I do, stuff on Skype or FaceTime or things like that. I also do pastoral counseling remotely on the internet. And I do a lot of publishing. And I'm making class videos that are going to go up on my website as well. I have a Torah study class that I do every Thursday, and that stuff goes up on the website as well. So that's kind of what I do. I'm pretty involved generally in town in politics, as you might have guessed. mostly Democratic Party politics. So, what else can I say? My wife, Linda, and I have been married for 23 years, and we have a little house in Hyde Park. I have 2 kids who are grown from a first marriage. My daughter, Ilana, is 36, and my son, Ben, is 30. And they're both married. And I was honored to do my son's wedding this past a year ago, August. And Linda and I adopted a little girl from China 12 years ago, whose name is Emily, and just had her bat mitzvah last December. So
she's Jewish.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Chinese Jewish.
She's Chinese and Jewish, yes. Yeah. See, this is kind of what I'm saying. But you can look. She said something really funny today. She said she got home from school. She said one of her friends was talking about her, and said that she had no idea that she was Asian. What did she think you were? Oh, white. Well, you got to get a better class of friends. This is not a kid who knows a lot. I mean, it's kind of strange. Oddly enough, since we're talking about Chinese, the group that has adopted more Chinese babies than any other group in the United States is Jewish. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? See, it's related to Tikkun Olam. What are you doing? You're taking somebody out of a terrible environment and giving them a better environment. It's a way of affecting the world. Okay, here's 2 examples of this. You remember when there were a bunch of Muslims in the former Yugoslavia, in Serbia, Croatia, who were kind of fleeing from that area? They had trouble finding places to live. A lot of different countries around the world. A huge number of them now live in Israel from that time. They were taken in. Why? Because that's what That's what kind of when we needed to have people take us in, nobody was there for us. Even the United States was not there for us. Another story. And also the Vietnamese boat people. There were thousands of Vietnamese boat people that were taken in Israel, and they're citizens of Israel today. So kind of an interesting kind of thing. Again, related to Tikkun Olam. I have another question. No. Yes, sir.
I forgot what was called the sharpening of the knives. Could you say that again?
Not knives, but chadadim. Okay. Yeah.
How do you spell that?
Chet, dalid. I know how to. It's if you transliterated, it may be a ch like in Hanukkah, right? Chadim, then repeat. Chadadim. It's like the knife and the what do you call this? Well, when it could be wedding, so I wasn't thinking of that. You're sharp.
Iron sharpens iron.
Hmm?
Iron sharpens iron.
Yeah, that's the idea. You asked why?
It's mainly for my brother and his father-in-law. That was like the exact situation he described. And my brother, like me, were very kind of polite, Texan kind of boys, and his father-in-law's from New York originally. And so that kind of, I think that's an epiphany. I think that explained kind of that my brother doesn't realize that that's what's going on, the way his father-in-law is trying to communicate with him.
Well, you see these different ways in which people sometimes annoy each other have a lot to do with different cultural styles, different cultural values, and so on and so forth. And if you don't understand where it comes from, it is off-putting. interruption is one of them. Arguing is one of them, but there are other examples as well. If you're Jewish, you tell jokes. Every Jew tells jokes. He uses humor. I mean, it's just part of who we are. Where does it come from? It comes from the fact that when you grow up in an environment where there is hostility around you and there is repression or discrimination or whatever it is, one of the ways you can survive it is not just by being funny, but there's a way, particular style here, of sort of exacting on your tormentor, which you would like to be able to do, but actually can't. Okay? So I will tell you a little joke. We don't do one of my favorite jokes. This one is about the Holocaust. You would think that you can't tell a joke about the Holocaust, but you can. So there's a little old Jewish man who's walking the streets of Berlin in the late 30s, and he's carrying a chicken. And as he's walking along, one of the brown shirt fellows came up to him and said, "Jew, where are you going with that chicken?" And the man says, "Well, I was going to go and buy some corn to feed my chicken." And the brown shirt says, "Feed your chicken, your Jewish chicken, with good German corn? That's ridiculous." And he beats him and he got close to the ground. And the brown shirt leaves. The Jew picks himself up, picks up his chicken, dusts himself off, and then walks down the street. And then another Nazi, maybe one of the Gestapo kinds, who knows, comes up to him and says, "Jew, where are you going with that chicken?" "Well, I thought I would take my chicken to go get some wheat, and so I can feed my chicken." "Wheat? You're going to waste good German wheat on your Jewish chicken? How dare you?" And he throttles him, and the guy falls to the ground. Now, when the Gestapo guy leaves, the Jew gets up and he picks up his chicken, he dusts himself off, and he walks along. And of course, he's stopped by the inevitable third Nazi. He says, "Jew, where are you going with that chicken?" He says, "Well, I thought I would give the chicken a penny. He can buy whatever he wants." You see, what's good about that joke is that, you know, the Jew outsmarts the Nazi. You like that one? The Jew outsmarts the Nazi, puts him in his place, which is something he could never do in real life. Okay? That's kind of what I mean. Not just having a sense of humor about things, but using the humor almost as, it's not exactly a weapon, some kind of shield or defense or something, you know. Okay, we have another question, please.
How large is the Jewish population in Austin, and how does it generally break down in terms of Orthodox Reform?
That's a good question. Okay, so nobody knows exactly, because there hasn't been a good demographic survey done in at least 10, 15 years. The best guess is there's probably somewhere between 10 on the low side to maybe 15 or 16,000 on the high side. How are they distributed? Well, first of all, the largest group are unaffiliated. Okay? Well, I don't know. A large group is unaffiliated. Okay? But that unaffiliated is a strange term, because they may not be affiliated with a synagogue, but they might be a member of the Jewish Community Center, or they might be a member of the Hadassah group, which is a Jewish women's organization, or they might be active in the B'nai B'rith Anti-Defamation League, which these are not religious organizations, but they're also a way of identifying. Of the Jews who are religious, by which I mean members of a synagogue, there are very few Orthodox Jews in Austin, although there are a lot more than there used to be. When I first moved here in 1987, there were two synagogues, the synagogue and the temple, meaning the conservative synagogue and the Reformed temple. Now there's two Reformed synagogues, there's two conservative synagogues, There's an Orthodox synagogue. There's a non-denominational synagogue, Kolala, which I founded. There's a Reconstructionist synagogue. So there's a whole bunch of them that didn't exist before. Of those many groups, by far the largest groups are the Reformed synagogues and second, conservative synagogues. It's hard to say exactly how many, but probably in the Reformed synagogues include around 1,200 membership units. That means it could be a family of 5, it could be one person. The conservative probably is more like around total of about 700, 750, something like that. But those are by far the two largest religious groups. Sorry?
I said that answers it.
Yeah, okay, good. Yes, ma'am.
What is a non-denominational?
How
does that work?
Well, it's actually, the real term is post-denominational. Look, it's like this. And this is something that you're going to read about in my little handout, which is your homework for next time. There is a religious component to Jewish life. It's part of Jewish culture. But one is not Jewish or not Jewish, depending upon whether or not one is religious or not religious. One is not Jewish or not Jewish, depending upon whether or not you belong to a synagogue or you don't. Whereas in the Christian world, those things would be marks of being Christian. You profess certain beliefs, you witness to certain things, and you got to kind of be, in some sense, members of the body of Christ, right? Okay. So, but that's not true for Jews. There are many Jews who are religious, many who are not. Because it is a people with all sorts of dimensions of culture, religion being one of them, an important one, but not the only one. So, I think it's fair to say that for this reason, you really can't look at who is Jewish in the same way as you look at who's a Christian, who's not a Christian. Basically, I think would have to say that to be a Jew is to be a part of this group. When you become a Jew, you are becoming a part of this group. Sort of imagine we're at watching one of the old-time westerns in a movie theater, and somebody will say, what outfit do you belong to? Who do you ride with? Okay? Well, it's kind of like that. If you're a Jew, the outfit you belong to is the Jewish outfit. And that's who you ride with. Okay? That is your group, and you go through history sharing the benefits and the deficits of being a part of that group. And what happens to them happens to you. It's not a reason to be Jewish, but during the Second World War, if you had one Jewish grandparent, the Nazis said you were Jewish. There are plenty of Jews by this definition who had nothing to do with Judaism. Certainly not religious Judaism, and we're not even part of the culture or the groups that are involved. But they were defined that way by the Nazis. Well, so sorry. What happens to the group happens to you. And nobody, says, well, you have a pass because you're a good Jew, or you don't act like the other Jews, or you're not, that's nonsense, okay? That's not a reason to be Jewish. It's just a statement of the reality of being a part of this particular group. And you can say you're not a part of it if you want to, and you can be dissociated if you want to. And plenty of people do. But part of what defines a community is not only what you choose, but what other people choose. it may not be fair. It certainly doesn't square with our notions in the 21st century of self-actualization. Okay, I am who I say I am, and so I got to be me. But some people don't care what you say you are. You are what they say you are. And that's just the way life works sometimes. Okay. By the way, if you are a white European descent, you've encountered this.
If you're a white European descent, right?
If you are a descendant of white Europeans, okay? Because people talk about whites and what they do and what they believe all the time. Does it matter whether your folks are from Poland or England or France or wherever? No, you're just white. And you're just white, and there's certain things that are attributed to you because you're white. Welcome to the multicultural world. Okay? And a lot of people don't like this. I don't blame them. If you would like to know how to handle it, talk to us. We can tell you all about that. We have time for one more question.
Talk about the tendency, or not tendency, but the don't marry outside of the Jewish people.
Okay. It used to be more true than it is now. Right now, more than half of all Jewish marriages are interfaith marriages.
What?
Interfaith marriages. Okay. More than half. A few generations ago, it was a rare thing. No longer. To a certain degree, it is an inevitable byproduct of what? A propinquity. It's the cost, you might say, or it's the byproduct of the breakdown of our sort of hermetically sealed groups that used to be sort of the way we operated in the United States. There are all sorts of groups that are likely to be a part of your life that 100 years ago were not. Not the least of whom are African Americans or Hispanic Americans or Jewish Americans, for that matter. So inevitably, some of that is going to result in people marrying each other. Nothing you can do about it. The only way you can deal with it is if you wanted to go sort of back into the ghetto. And the vast majority of Jews don't want to do that. In 1806, there was a convening of the Great Sanhedrin, organized by Napoleon, no less. If you had any doubts that Napoleon was a megalomaniac, the idea that after 2,000 years he was going to resurrect the Sanhedrin under his aegis it's like a stunner. Okay, so here's what happened. The year before, in 1805, there was an assembly of Jewish notables, and they were asked 10 questions. But depending upon what the answers were, they would either get the same rights of citizenship that other French people had, or they would not. So they had to answer correctly. So a number of these questions were, kind of predictable. One of them was exactly what you're asking. Does the Jewish community recognize marriages between Jews and Gentiles? Well, nobody liked that idea, including the French, by the way. The French had just finished arguing during the French Revolution whether or not Jews were human, and therefore they could be French citizens. That was only a few years before. Think about it. But the these notables, these Jewish leaders knew that if they said the wrong things, they were going to be consigned to the old role of the ghetto. So they said the right things. Some people were okay with that. Others did it with a great deal of discomfort. But in this Sanhedrin, they ratified all 10 of these questions. And French Jews had the rights of French citizens. That's kind of how it goes on. So that's 1806. So this is a long-standing question. The problem, why do people care about it? Well, because if you want to survive, as we were hearing in the DVD, what do you need to survive? Well, one of the things you need is a community, and one of the things you need to have a community is families. And what you need to have families that are going to be part of a Jewish community is families that are Jewish. So you need to have a mother and a father who are Jewish, and they're raising Jewish kids if you want anybody to be part of the community. If you don't have that, the community is eventually going to fade into existence. So it means a lot to say that there's an issue about marrying in or marrying out. Okay, so that's kind of a short answer to that. Okay, we need to stop. And one of the things I want to do is to give you a little different perspective on some of these questions we dealt with today. This is from a former colleague of mine, Rabbi Infeld, who used to be the director of the Hillel National Office. He came after I was at UT, but he's written a very nice piece on peoplehood, which I would like you to read. And
so what will you be talking about next week?
Well, I'm going to talk about Jewish custom and Jewish law next week. I'm going to be talking also the following week about history. And I'm going to be talking also about the last week Jewish worship and practice. Now, having said all that, if you have any questions you would like me to address during the course of our time together, please send me an email. My email address is very complicated, so pay attention. It's rabbibaker@gmail.com. Okay? rabbibaker@gmail.com.
One word. Rabbi Baker.
Oh, yeah, one word, right, yeah. So send me an email with a question, and I will do my best to incorporate that in what we do.
Well, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.